The pilot's voice came on the speaker. Prepare for crash landing. 214 people closed their eyes. Everyone was ready to die. Then a farmer in seat 14C stood up. He walked straight to the cockpit door. He knocked. And he said 4 words that saved every single life on that plane. Give me the controls. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The announcement came without warning. Flight 4412 was cruising at 36,000 feet somewhere over the Rocky Mountains. The sky outside the windows was dark blue and perfectly clear. Passengers were eating snacks, watching movies on small screens, and reading books. A baby was sleeping in the arms of a tired mother. 2 old men were playing cards in the back row. Everything felt completely normal. Then the speaker crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain David Mercer speaking. His voice was tight. Not calm. Not the smooth, bored voice pilots use when they announce turbulence or a delayed arrival. This voice was different. Controlled, but only barely. We are experiencing multiple system failures. I need all flight attendants to begin cabin preparation immediately. Passengers, please fasten your seatbelts and remain in your seats. I will update you shortly. The plane went silent. Not the normal silence of a long flight. This was the silence of 214 people holding their breath at the exact same moment. Then, 40 seconds later, the speaker came back on. Folks, I'm going to be honest with you. We have lost hydraulic control in our primary systems. Our left engine is failing. We have significant structural damage from an undetected bird strike near the engine mount. I need all passengers to listen carefully now. Prepare for crash landing. I repeat, prepare for crash landing. There is no airport within our gliding range. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for emergency impact. Passengers, brace positions in approximately 4 minutes. 4 minutes. That was it. That was all the time left. The cabin exploded into noise. People screamed. A man in a business suit grabbed the seat in front of him so hard his knuckles turned white. A teenage girl was crying and typing on her phone so fast her fingers were a blur. The flight attendants moved with terrifying purpose, not running, but walking fast, faces set hard, voices sharp and clear. Brace position. Head down. Hands over your neck. Brace position now. A woman in the middle of the plane began to pray out loud. And in seat 14C, a man named Tom Briggs did not move. He sat perfectly still. Tom Briggs was 53 years old. He had short gray hair and large, rough hands. He was wearing a faded blue flannel shirt, worn jeans, and brown work boots that were scratched and scuffed from years of hard use. Around him, people were crying, praying, and saying goodbye into their phones. The man next to him, a young guy in an expensive jacket, was gripping the armrest with both hands and whispering, "No, no, no," over and over again. Tom looked out the window. He could see the left wing from his seat. He could see the engine. And what he saw made something cold move through his chest, not fear exactly, but recognition. The engine cowling had separated on one side. There was visible buckling in the metal near the pylon where the engine attached to the wing. And the flap on the left side was stuck at an angle that was completely different from the right side. He had seen damage like this before. Not on a commercial plane. But on aircraft. He knew what it meant. Tom Briggs had grown up in Kansas. He had farmed corn and wheat and soybeans for the last 22 years on 400 acres of flat, windy land outside a small town called Millbrook. He drove a tractor. He fixed fences. He woke up before sunrise and went to bed after dark. Most people who looked at him saw exactly what he appeared to be, a farmer on his way home from visiting his sister in Denver. What most people did not see was the 23 years that came before the farm. 23 years in the United States Air Force. Not flying transport planes or passenger jets. Tom Briggs had flown fighters. F-16s. Then later, after selection and years of additional training, experimental aircraft at Edwards Air Force Base, aircraft with program names instead of proper titles, aircraft that flew at the edges of what physics was supposed to allow. He had 3,100 flight hours. He had survived 6 emergency situations that would have killed a less experienced pilot. He had ejected once, from a prototype at high altitude, and spent 16 minutes falling through clouds before his parachute opened. He had retired from the Air Force at 45 and gone home to farm the land his father had left him. He had not flown anything in 8 years. But he had never stopped reading. Aviation accident reports. Engineering journals. Every major commercial crash of the last 2 decades, he had studied them the way some men study history or sports statistics. Not out of morbid curiosity. Just because knowledge, once built, is hard to let go of. And right now, looking at the left wing of this dying aircraft, Tom's brain was running calculations that his conscious mind had not even asked it to start. Descent rate. Altitude. Glide ratio with asymmetric engine power. Control authority remaining with partial hydraulics. Time to impact at current configuration. The math was bad. But it was not impossible. He unbuckled his seatbelt. "Sir, you need to stay seated." The flight attendant was at his row in 3 steps, her hand on his shoulder, her voice firm and professional even though her eyes were terrified. "Sir, please, we are." "I need to speak to the captain," Tom said. His voice came out low and level. The voice he used when a combine was breaking down in the middle of harvest and there was no time for panic. "Right now. My name is Tom Briggs. I am a retired Air Force test pilot with over 3,000 flight hours. I have flown aircraft with exactly this kind of damage profile. Please tell the captain I am coming to the cockpit door." The flight attendant stared at him for 1 full second. Something in his face, the complete absence of panic, the specific way he had described the damage, the flatness in his eyes that comes only from real experience with real emergencies, made her step back. "Come with me," she said. The cockpit door was locked, as it always is on commercial flights. Tom knocked twice, hard. "Captain Mercer. My name is Tom Briggs, seat 14C. I am a retired USAF test pilot, Edwards Air Force Base, Experimental Aircraft Division. 3,100 hours. I can see your left wing from my window. I know your damage configuration. Open the door." 5 seconds. 10. Then the lock clicked. The door opened and Captain David Mercer looked at Tom with red-rimmed eyes and the expression of a man who has been fighting a losing battle and knows it. He was in his early 50s, broad-shouldered, and clearly a very good pilot. The aircraft was still in controlled flight, which given the damage was itself an achievement. Behind him, the co-pilot, a younger woman named First Officer Sandra Reyes, had both hands on the controls and was using every bit of her concentration to keep the plane stable. The instrument panel was a field of red and amber warning lights. "Talk fast," Captain Mercer said. "Left engine is at partial thrust at best," Tom said, stepping into the cockpit doorway. "You've lost primary hydraulics. Your left outboard flap is jammed at roughly 15 degrees, I can see it from the window. You're fighting a roll tendency to the left, which is eating your remaining control authority and increasing your descent rate. You are currently losing altitude at approximately 4,000 feet per minute. At that rate you have maybe 3.5 minutes before you are too low for any recovery option." Mercer's jaw tightened. "That matches what we're seeing. What do you want?" Tom looked him straight in the eye. "Give me the controls," he said. "I can bring this plane down." The cockpit went very quiet. Only the warning alarms and the sound of wind against the cracked windscreen filled the silence. First Officer Reyes turned her head slightly. Mercer stared at Tom without blinking. "You are a farmer, Mercer said. Not a question. A test. I am a farmer who flew experimental jets for the United States Air Force for 23 years, Tom said. I have done this before, not on a 737, but on aircraft with the same kind of damage. I know exactly what is killing this plane right now. And I know how to stop it. But I need the controls. Right now. We have maybe 3 minutes. Mercer did not move. What is your plan? He said. You are fighting the aircraft's roll tendency, Tom said. Stop fighting it. Let the left wing drop into a controlled bank. We use the asymmetric lift to slow our descent and convert altitude into forward distance. We are not going to reach an airport. But there is flat terrain. If we extend our glide range, we can find a road, a dry riverbed, a field. The spiral descent technique converts vertical speed into horizontal range. We lose altitude slower and we cover more ground. That sounds like entering a spin, First Officer Reyes said without turning around. A spiral, not a spin, Tom said. There is a difference. A spin is uncontrolled. A spiral descent with controlled bank angle and coordinated inputs is manageable. I have done it 17 times in test scenarios and twice in real emergencies. The aircraft you are flying is more stable than anything I flew at Edwards. It will hold together. Captain Mercer looked at him for 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a long time when the ground is coming up. Show me your hands, Mercer said. Tom held them up. They were large and rough and completely steady. Sandra, Mercer said quietly. Give him the controls. Tom slid into the captain's seat and put his hands on the controls. The yoke felt unfamiliar, bigger than fighter controls, softer in response, designed for precision rather than speed. But the fundamental language was the same. He could feel the aircraft through his palms. He could feel the way it wanted to roll left, the constant pressure against that tendency, the shaking in the airframe from the damaged engine. It was like holding a conversation with something that was badly hurt but still trying. Co-pilot, Tom said, I need right engine at full rated thrust. Left engine, pull back to 50%. We are going to let the roll happen, deliberately and in a controlled way. When I say now, I need coordinated right rudder and right aileron input to maintain bank angle at 45 degrees and prevent the roll from going past 60. Understood, Reyes said. Captain, I need you on radio and navigation. Find me the longest straight flat feature within 35 miles northwest of our current position. Road, dry riverbed, any cleared field with at least 1 mile of unobstructed length. We need a surface. Anything. Mercer was already at the navigation screen. Now, Tom said. He released the constant right aileron pressure that had been fighting the roll. The left wing dropped. Through the windscreen, the horizon tilted. Behind them in the cabin, Tom knew, every single passenger just felt the plane lurch sideways and believed they were about to die. There was no way to explain to them that the lurch was the plan. The aircraft tilted left into a controlled bank. Tom felt the G-forces shift. He felt the descent rate change, not stop, but change in character. The steep plunging dive began to flatten into something more like a long, slanting glide. The instruments confirmed it. Descent rate, 3,800 feet per minute. Then 3,400. Then 3,100. Descent rate is coming down, Reyes said, and there was something new in her voice. Not relief, it was too early for relief. But the sharp edge of someone who has just seen an impossible thing begin to be possible. We need it under 2,500, Tom said. Adjust left engine to 40%. Steepen the bank to 50 degrees. 50 degrees is. I know what 50 degrees is, Tom said, not unkindly. Do it. The bank angle increased. The spiral tightened. The descent rate dropped to 2,800. Then 2,600. Then 2,450. I have something, Captain Mercer said from behind Tom. State Highway 9, running northwest through a valley. Straight section, looks like a mile and a half, maybe more. Mostly clear. Some vehicle traffic. 41 miles out. Altitude? Tom asked. 8,200 feet. Tom did the math in his head in about 4 seconds. The spiral was buying them range. Not enough range. Not yet. But the direction was right. It was the difference between landing in forest at 200 miles per hour and landing on a road at 140. One meant certain death. The other meant possible survival. Give me the heading, Tom said. The numbers came and Tom began to adjust, using differential engine power and the limited hydraulic authority they still had to steer the spiraling aircraft toward the northwest. The aircraft was responding. Slowly, with effort, like something wounded being guided rather than commanded, but responding. For the next 4 minutes, the cockpit was almost silent. Reyes called out altitude every 30 seconds. Mercer tracked the heading and watched the navigation screen. Tom flew, making constant small adjustments with his hands and feet, reading the aircraft the way he had learned to read everything that flew, not just through instruments but through touch, through vibration, through the subtle communication that exists between a pilot and an airframe when the pilot has enough experience to listen. The aircraft was talking to him. Telling him where it was struggling. Telling him where it still had something left to give. He listened. 6,000 feet, Reyes said. 28 miles out. Still not enough. The math was still bad. But less bad. We need one more move, Tom said. At the right moment I am going to roll out of this bank, go wings level and trade the spiral for a straight glide. It will stress the damaged wing. We may lose some control surfaces when it happens. But if the wing holds, we will cover the remaining distance. If it does not hold, then we were already going to die, Mercer said quietly. Yes, Tom said. How will you know when it is the right moment? Feel, Tom said. He kept flying. 4,000 feet. 19 miles. Tom was watching the wing. He had been watching it for 3 minutes, the buckled metal near the engine mount, the way it flexed slightly with every change in load, the way the damaged flap shook in the airstream. The wing was telling him something. He was waiting to hear exactly what. 3,500 feet. 16 miles. There. He felt it. A slight easing in the vibration. The aircraft settling into the spiral, finding a temporary equilibrium. The wing was loaded but stable. There was a window here. A narrow one. Brace, Tom said. Rolling out now. His hands moved. He pulled the yoke right and added right rudder at the same time. The aircraft fought back. The damaged wing screamed, a physical, structural sound that transmitted through the entire airframe and through Tom's hands and through the seat and through his bones. The controls went soft for 1 terrible second. The aircraft began to depart the spiral into something less controlled. Tom held on. He held on and made micro-adjustments, not fighting the aircraft, never fighting it, but guiding it, coaxing it, giving it small confident inputs the way you calm a frightened animal. He had learned this in test flying. The aircraft does not want to die. The aircraft wants to fly. Sometimes you have to help it remember that. The bank angle decreased. 50 degrees. 40. 25. 15. 10. Wings level. Descent rate 4,000 feet per minute, Reyes said, and her voice was tight. We're dropping faster. I know. We need 60 seconds. The spiral had built their forward momentum. Going wings level now was like a stone skipping across water. They were using the energy they had stored in the spiral to cover horizontal distance at the cost of altitude. The math had shifted. It was going to be very, very close. I see it, Mercer said. Straight ahead. The highway. Tom saw it too. A gray line through the dark green of pine forest. It looked impossibly thin. Impossibly short. A thread through a carpet. Altitude? 2,100 feet. 8 miles. Tom pushed the nose down slightly, not much, just enough. Trading the last of their altitude cushion for airspeed, for the ability to flare at the moment of landing and not simply fall out of the sky. It was a gamble. Everything in the last 7 minutes had been a gamble. But this was the last one. I need you both to hold on, Tom said. This landing will be rough. The gear is down. Gear is down and locked, Reyes confirmed. Hydraulics held for gear extension. Good. That helps. We will land fast. Probably 150 knots. The aircraft will try to veer. I will use differential engine power and what braking we have to keep us on the road. Your job is to hold on and be ready to evacuate immediately on stopping. Understood, Mercer said. Captain, prepare the cabin. Mercer's voice came over the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we are attempting an emergency landing on a rural highway. This is going to be a hard landing. Stay in brace positions. Keep your heads down. Keep your seatbelts on. When the aircraft stops, follow flight attendant instructions immediately. You have all been very brave. In seat 14C, now empty, the man's neighbor was still gripping the armrest with both hands. Around him, 213 people had their heads down and their hands clasped over their necks. The cabin was full of the sounds of prayer and quiet crying and the strange stillness of people who have accepted something terrible and decided to face it with dignity. 1,000 feet. 4 miles. The highway was clear ahead. Tom could see individual trees on either side of the road. He could see a white pickup truck that had pulled over and stopped. The driver must have seen an airliner descending toward his road and done the only sensible thing, which was to get as far out of the way as possible. 500 feet. The trees were rising to meet them. Tom kept the nose up just enough. The aircraft was shaking badly now, the damaged structure vibrating at multiple frequencies, the warning system screaming, the instrument panel a solid wall of red. 200 feet. The tree line ended. The road was beneath them. 100 feet. Tom cut the throttles. He pulled the nose up. The main gear touched the asphalt. The impact was enormous. Not a landing, a controlled collision. The aircraft hit the highway and the sound was a physical thing, a wall of noise that lasted for 1 second and then became something continuous, metal on asphalt, the shriek of brakes, the aircraft shaking itself apart as it decelerated from 148 knots on a road that was never designed for anything wider than a truck. Tom had both hands on the yoke and both feet on the rudder pedals. The aircraft tried to veer left, the damaged engine creating asymmetric drag. Tom corrected. It tried to veer right, a tire blowing out. Tom corrected again. He was not landing anymore. He was steering a very large, very fast, very damaged object down a road and trying to keep it from going into the pine forest on either side, where the trees would tear the fuselage apart like paper. The aircraft was slowing. 100 knots. 80, 60. At 40 knots, the nose gear collapsed. The nose dropped and hit the asphalt and the sound was terrible, a grinding shriek of metal on road that sent sparks flying past the windscreen in orange streams. The aircraft slid forward on its belly, still decelerating, still more or less on the road. 30 knots. 20. Stop. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. Then Captain Mercer said, very quietly, "Oh my God." Reyes had her face in her hands. Her shoulders were shaking. Tom sat with his hands still on the yoke. His hands were trembling now, not during, but after, which is the way it always works. The adrenaline finds the cracks when the emergency is over. He looked through the cracked windscreen at the road ahead. They had used nearly a mile of highway. Behind them was a trail of torn asphalt and small debris. The nose of the aircraft had carved a shallow groove in the road surface. The left wing tip had struck the asphalt during the final slide and been sheared off cleanly. From the cabin behind him, he heard the sounds he had been hoping for. Voices. Confused, frightened, disbelieving voices, but voices. Living voices. People asking each other if it was over. A child calling for her mother. A man saying, "We stopped, we actually stopped," over and over like a prayer. "Everyone out," Tom said. "Right now. Fire risk." He stood up and moved back through the cabin door. The scene in the cabin was chaos, but manageable chaos. The overhead bins had burst open and luggage was everywhere. Several people had head injuries from the impact. One man's arm was clearly broken. But the rows were intact, the fuselage had held, and the emergency exits were being opened by flight attendants who had trained for this moment their entire careers and were now executing that training with precision. Tom moved through the cabin toward the rear exit. Nobody looked at him. In the urgent business of evacuation, he was just another body moving toward the door. He helped two elderly women to the exit and lowered them to the emergency slide. He helped a man who was dazed and could not quite figure out where he was. He picked up a small girl, maybe 4 years old, confused and crying, and carried her to her mother who was 3 rows back, unhurt, looking for her with a face full of desperate love. Then he slid down the evacuation chute and stepped onto the highway asphalt. The air smelled of pine trees and burning rubber and aviation fuel. In the distance, already, he could hear sirens. He walked away from the aircraft. Not running. Just walking, steadily, toward the tree line at the side of the road. Around him, 213 survivors were sitting on the asphalt, standing in small groups, holding each other, crying, calling family members. Emergency vehicles were approaching from both directions, lights flashing in the afternoon sun. "Hey!" Captain Mercer's voice, behind him. "Hey, Tom. Tom Briggs." Tom stopped. He turned around. Mercer was standing near the nose of the aircraft, looking at him. The captain's white shirt was torn and there was a cut above his eye, but he was standing straight. First Officer Reyes was next to him. Several passengers were nearby, and some of them were also looking at Tom now. Mercer walked toward him. When he was close enough, he stopped. He looked at Tom for a long moment. Tom could see the emotion in the captain's face, the kind of emotion that comes after extreme fear has passed and left a person raw and open. "I need to say something to you," Mercer said. "You don't have to," Tom said. "Yes, I do." Mercer straightened up. "You saved this aircraft. You saved every person on it. I want to know, who are you? Where did you come from? What is your name really?" "I told you. Tom Briggs. Seat 14C. You were a farmer on a flight home." "I am a farmer on a flight home," Tom said. "I was other things before that. Those other things saved our lives today." Tom looked at the damaged aircraft sitting on the highway. The nose was crumpled. The left wing tip was gone. The belly was scraped raw. But the fuselage was intact. The windows were mostly intact. The exits were open and people were out and alive. 214 people. "Is everyone accounted for?" Tom asked. "Still counting," Mercer said. "But it looks like, yes. Everyone is out. We have some injuries. Nothing life-threatening from what we can tell." Tom nodded. He looked at the highway. At the mountains in the distance. At the pine forest on either side of the road. He thought about his farm in Kansas. About the north field that needed reseeding. About the fence on the east side that had been sagging for 2 weeks. About his dog, a big mixed breed named Biscuit, who would be waiting by the door when he got home. "I need to call my sister," Tom said. Tell her I'm going to be late getting back. Mercer blinked. Then, despite everything, despite the adrenaline and the shock and the destroyed aircraft 20 feet behind them, he laughed. A short, genuine, slightly disbelieving laugh. Your sister, he said. I was visiting her in Denver, Tom said. She'll have seen this on the news by now. Mercer shook his head slowly. The NTSB is going to want to talk to you. The FAA. The airline. Everyone. I know, Tom said. I'll be here. He paused. After I call my sister, he added. The emergency response arrived fully within 11 minutes. 2 fire trucks, 4 ambulances, 3 state police cars, and eventually a rescue helicopter that circled overhead and then landed in a cleared section of road ahead of the aircraft. Paramedics moved through the survivor groups with practiced efficiency, identifying injuries, providing first aid. Tom sat on a guardrail at the side of the highway and called his sister. She picked up on the first ring. Tom. Tom, I'm watching the news right now, they're saying Flight 4412, is that your flight? Are you? I'm fine, Tom said. I'm sitting on a guardrail in the mountains. I'm fine. A long silence. Then his sister's voice, very quiet, what happened? Plane had some trouble, Tom said. We landed on a highway. Another silence. Tom. Yeah. Did you do something? He watched a paramedic help a young woman sit down on the asphalt. He watched an older man embrace his adult son. He watched a little boy run to a flight attendant and hug her knees because she was the nearest adult and he needed to hug someone. The pilot did a great job, Tom said. The whole crew did. Everyone came through. His sister knew him well enough to understand what that meant and what it didn't mean. She let it go. Come home, she said. I will, Tom said. Might be a day or two. There's some paperwork. He hung up and sat on the guardrail. A state police officer came over to take his information. Tom gave it without drama, name, address, seat number, Air Force service record in summary form. The officer wrote it down and moved on. Mercer found him again an hour later, when the immediate emergency response had settled into the organized work of transporting survivors to a nearby town where the airline had arranged hotel accommodations and medical assessment. I've been talking to some of the passengers, Mercer said, sitting down on the guardrail next to Tom. A few of them saw you stand up. Saw you walk to the cockpit. They're saying things. What kind of things? The kind of things people say when they were sure they were about to die and then they weren't. Mercer paused. There's a woman, her name is Patricia Dolan, she was in 14D, right next to you. She says she watched you look out the window at the wing. She says you looked completely calm. Like you already knew what you were going to do. I wasn't calm, Tom said. I was calculating. She also says you looked like a farmer. Tom smiled faintly. I am a farmer. Mercer was quiet for a moment. Then, 8 years out of the cockpit. And you still had all of that. You don't lose it, Tom said. You might think you do. But it's in there. The training doesn't go anywhere. It just waits. Do you miss flying? Tom considered the question seriously, as he did with most questions. He looked up at the sky, deep blue in the late afternoon, completely clear, the kind of sky that makes flying look like the most natural thing in the world. I miss some of it, he said. I don't miss what it cost. Mercer nodded slowly. He seemed to understand that without needing more explanation. I owe you something, Mercer said. I don't know what. I don't know if there is something equal to what you did today. But I owe you something. You don't, Tom said. You let me in the cockpit. That's all I needed. He stood up. Stretched his back, the landing had hit hard, and he was 53 years old, and the guardrail was not a comfortable place to sit for an hour. That technique you used, Mercer said. The spiral descent with the asymmetric configuration. Is that written down anywhere? Not in any manual you'd have access to, Tom said. Some of what we did at Edwards is still classified. But the principles are basic aerodynamics. Any good test pilot would recognize them. There are not many good test pilots who end up in seat 14C on a commercial flight. No, Tom agreed. There are not. An airline representative approached them, a young woman in a company blazer looking slightly stunned, carrying a clipboard with what appeared to be a very long list. She looked at Tom with the expression of someone who has been briefed on who he is and still cannot quite process it. "Mr. Briggs," she said. "We have arranged transportation for all passengers to the town of Carver, about 20 miles north. There will be hotel accommodation, medical assessment, and—" "Is there a bus?" Tom asked. Yes, a charter bus is arriving in 40 minutes. "I'll be on it," Tom said. He looked at Mercer one more time. The captain of Flight 4412, who had made the right call when a stranger showed up at his cockpit door and said things that shouldn't have been possible. "You made the right decision," Tom said. "Letting me in. In that situation, with that little time, trusting a stranger, that takes something. I want you to know that." Mercer looked at him for a moment. "You had the kind of eyes that don't lie about experience," he said finally. "I recognized it. I've seen it in the good ones." Tom nodded. Then he picked up the small bag he had carried off the aircraft, slightly scuffed from the evacuation slide but otherwise intact, and walked toward the growing cluster of survivors waiting for transportation. 3 days later, Tom Briggs was back on his farm in Millbrook, Kansas. The north field needed reseeding. He did that on the first morning. The fence on the east side needed fixing. He did that on the afternoon of the second day. Biscuit the dog followed him. Everywhere, pressed against his leg with the particular intensity dogs show when their owners have been away and they are not quite ready to let them out of sight again. The phone rang constantly for a week. The NTSB. The FAA. Aviation journalists. 2 television networks. An aviation safety research institute. He spoke to the ones who needed him for official purposes and declined the rest politely. He was not rude about it. He just had a farm to run. Captain Mercer called on the 4th day. "The preliminary NTSB report is out," Mercer said. It credits, quote, "unconventional emergency procedures executed by a qualified pilot resulting in controlled ground impact and preservation of the aircraft's primary structure." End quote. "That's accurate," Tom said. "It doesn't say your name." "That's fine with me." A pause. "There are 214 people who know your name," Mercer said. "Some of them have been looking for you. Not to bother you. Just to," he stopped. "There's a man named Kevin Park. He was in row 22. He has a wife and twin daughters. He has written you a letter. 3 pages. He asked me if I could get it to you somehow." Tom was standing in his kitchen, looking out the window at the east field. The fence he had fixed was holding fine. The sky was gray and promising rain, which the soil needed. "Send it to me," Tom said. "And there is something else. The Aviation Research Institute, Dr. Chen's team at MIT, they have asked if you would be willing to consult. Not publicly. Not with your name attached. Just the knowledge. The procedure. What you did and why. They want to understand it well enough to teach it." Tom thought about this. He thought about the next aircraft that might find itself at 8,000 feet with asymmetric wing damage and no airport in range. He thought about the next captain who might face an impossible situation with only the options that are written in the Emergency Procedures Manual. He thought about knowledge that helps people and what it means to keep it to yourself. "Tell them I'll talk to them," he said. "They can come here. I'm not going anywhere." He hung up and went back outside. The rain was starting, soft and steady, the kind his wheat liked. He stood on the porch for a moment and listened to it. In the distance, a hawk was riding a thermal in slow circles, rising higher with each pass, going up into the gray sky with total confidence and total ease. Tom watched it for a while. Then he went inside, made coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table with Kevin Park's letter. He read all 3 pages. He sat with it for a long time after. Then he got a piece of paper and wrote back. 214 people came home that day. A retired Air Force test pilot who had chosen wheat fields over flight lines went back to his farm. And somewhere in the sky above Kansas, aircraft flew on, a little safer, because one farmer in seat 14C had not stayed seated when it mattered.